Hello, happy campers. I'm
Hello,
Spike,
Chris.
and we are geeking out, and this is aftermath for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. And hey, Chris, look, sky. We're doing
Oh
we're
my
doing our first
goodness.
we're
Oh
doing
my
our first
goodness.
outdoor episode here just to get out of the house. But so
Wow.
talking about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and yes, that was a Guardians reference. You'll hear noises here and there, including several noisy birds, but
Does feel good out here
keep awesome. Anyway, so we're here to talk
Yes.
about Guardians 3. Just thought, I know we're a week late after everybody else, but gives it time to ferment, you know? So,
True. True.
Chris, you've been wanting to do this for a week because he saw it the first weekend it came out. Tell them about Guardians of the Galaxy 3.
Ah,
Ah.
well, let's see.
You've only
Without
been rehearsing this for a week. You should have
without
figured
giving
this out.
without giving out too much information on this, we're talking about a bunch of misfits who are all broken. If you've seen the first two, you'll know who these characters are, and in this one, you get to love them even more. And here they are, on this one last adventure. This is supposedly their last hoorah. Um, and oh man, I just it's such a wild ride. I love the chemistry of this wacky team. How far they've come. Each one of them. I mean, heck, what's the Nebula? Yeah,
Mm.
Nebula. Like she went from just a murdering rampage to just being this. Just,
Character development. Something that's very
yeah, like a
rare in a
very very.
Disney film, especially in a Marvel film anymore.
It is such a great ride to go on, and in this one, it's basically Rocket's background, talking about where he came from, what happened to him, and that was tragic enough. And they're trying to save him. The villain of this is top notch villainry. Like, if you want to come up with a bad guy, this is. I don't think there's a bad guy that is better than this guy, which his name is what's his name?
The High
The
Evolutionary.
High Evolutionary. He is what Kang should have been. Okay, now Kang is the bad guy in the MCU that is supposed to be bigger and better than Thanos, and so far, like he was introduced in Loki, he was introduced in Ant Man, and so far he was. They did him wrong. He's not scary enough. I don't care about this villain. The villain in Guardians 3, the uh, Evolutionary,
Evolutionary.
is what King the Conqueror should be. This is like the top five villains of all time. He wants to be a god. He's not satisfied for anything that he has created. He will try and create something that is better. And when it gets to that point, it's still not good enough, so he destroys it. He has destroyed his own creations over and over and over again. He will give these creatures life and just kills it without even any type of remorse. And to me, that is just like, damn, you know, that is bad. Um, but yeah, I mean, this James Gunn, who wrote and directed this one, did such a good job of ending it, and I'm satisfied with how this is the last film. It's not one of those that I'm going to leave smiling and be like, yes, this was a good ending, and it wasn't bad ending either. It was just I'm settled, you know.
Mm.
It's like going through high school and knowing that everybody's going to go their separate ways. And then when you graduate, it's like, I might see you, I might not. I hope everything works out. That's the ending that we got. And I'm okay with it. So I love this movie. It is definitely the best movie since Phase 3, which was
Since
Endgame.
Endgame,
So,
which is what the stuff, the little blurb on the ad said.
yes.
There is quite a bit to unpack about this episode. I call it an episode. You might as well just call them episodes. They're not movies anymore. They're just episodes in an ongoing story. Problem is, most of these are just not worth dealing with. We did see a trailer for the Marvels coming out later this year.
We don't.
That's Ms. Marvel and some other Captain Marvel and another Captain Marvel. Too much testosterone, but characters nobody doesn't want to hear. Not even testosterone, too much estrogen. Nobody cares about these three characters. You're preaching to your increasingly shrinking audience. The incredible shrinking audience belongs on Svengoolie.
Yeah.
It's done. It's boring. This one, on the other hand, actually, as you mentioned, character development.
Lots.
I mean, the episode, half this movie, and I keep wanting to call it an episode, half this movie is Rocket's backstory. The other half is also Rocket centric, but around trying to save him from his past. The High Evolutionary is the villain in this one. A long-standing Marvel character, I believe, and I'm not as much of a Marvel historian as I am a DC historian. The High Evolutionary, I believe, is actually an offshoot Kang who wound up going into business for himself and getting a lot more hands-on instead of trying to manipulate what was already there. The High Evolutionary, if you want to get meta about this, there's a lot to unpack in this movie. We'll start with the High Evolutionary. Goes around creating. He says he's creating life. He's taking pre-existing life and welding it into different shapes and pieces, trying to set up the experiments so that he can create his own life from scratch, basically. This guy is the High Evolutionary really is a stand-in for anybody who is involved in the scientific fields right now, from viruses to genetics and cloning. You name the laundry list of potential scientific horrors. This guy is Dr. Fauci drawn to his logical conclusion. This guy is basically a scientific nightmare, is what it is. This is what happens when you don't pay attention to what you're doing as far as the scientific method. You're putting intelligence and knowledge over your own morals and your own values. The mission overall. So you can read into that as maybe a repudiation of this. It's the science, or follow the science. If you follow the science, you're probably going to be winding up going off a cliff somewhere if you're not careful. But there are other things to talk about here. This is the first, I believe, of the Guardian films. This is James Gunn's baby, exclusively. No co-writers. Kevin Feige's just going to let him do whatever he wants. He's producer on this. I was kind of surprised to only see one producer credit on this film, Kevin Feige. There may have been others, but his was the name in big neon lights. So basically, this was James Gunn's idea. And in the other two movies, he had other writers. He had other people working with him to help reel in what he's doing. And for a creator, sometimes most creators want to create, and again, we're getting meta here with the High Evolutionary. Getting what you want is not always a good thing. A governor is, if you look at a gasoline engine, for example, a governor limits the power in order to preserve the power you do get. It helps extend the life of the engine. A governor, for a creative purpose, helps rein in the creator so that what you get will stand the test of time better. It will be more cohesive, make more sense, have more intrinsic value. Uh, some creators can get away with doing their own creating without an editor, without a director, without a producer, without a manager, somebody, a spouse at least, who will sit there and give honest feedback. Uh, in this case, James Gunn was pretty much given a blank check, did what he wanted to do, and I guess he's of the idea that the first one was what, about 2 hours long. The second one was, and it was great. And the second one was like 2 hours and 10 minutes. So that was greater. So this one should be 2.5 hours, and it'll be greater or greaterest or something. Either way, this is not the first film I've had to make this complaint about this year. A half hour too long. Okay. This one suffers from Castle Princess syndrome. And considering Nintendo just released Zelda, I wish I could work in a Zelda reference, but you're going to have to settle for Super Mario. There's a point in the movie where they're trying to find some MacGuffin that will save Rocket's life, and it turns out they need something else afterwards. So it's your princess is in another castle. You manage to accomplish the mission. Now here's another mission you have to go on. And sure enough, it takes about another 30 minutes to do this. There's your extra 30 minutes. Could have torn a lot of that search out of the film, a lot of the folderol, probably would have cut, because that extra 30 minutes had a lot of special effects in it. Could have probably cut your budget in half and had just, 25% probably, because I think the budget here is what, 200 million?
I mean, true. What you say is true.
Mm-hmm.
But I will also say this from a personal standpoint of my own life. I've learned nothing is actually so simple. Even though it should be simple, it turns out it's not simple.
That's true. However, when it comes to creative projects and creative efforts, if you're overcomplicating things, that's where a lot of these really long movies are making mistakes. They're overcomplicating. Okay, you're throwing in details that don't need to be there. You're throwing in nice little gotcha. We could have cut out about a half dozen uses of the word idiot, and we wouldn't have lost a thing. Okay, and would have shaved a couple of minutes out of the film.
Speaking of things that should not or could have, sped up the process, Adam Warlock was introduced into this movie, and honestly, he was kind of just there, and there when you needed him. Mm-hmm. Not saying nothing bad about the character or the actor that played the character or the idea of the character. It was just kind of like, he's there. He wasn't the big part of the story, it felt like. So it was like he was supposed to be a big part of the story, but he was just a side character.
Adam Warlock was a distraction.
Yeah.
Adam Warlock is going, spoiler alert, Adam Warlock is going to be one of the second round Guardians under Captain Rocket Raccoon. Rocket survives, by the way. I don't care. It's been a week. They ain't seen it by now. Which brings up another point. There's a reason I waited a week to see this. I wanted to make sure it was worth watching. Both Marvel and its owner Disney have a lousy reputation as far as creative efforts of late. So I didn't want to give this the benefit of the doubt. It was better than I thought it would be, and I'm grateful for that. And let's just go ahead and say it. If you don't want to see animal abuse, you should not be watching this movie.
Yeah.
And this is one of those, I'll tell you the truth, okay? I have seen only 2 films now where CGI was able to reach out emotionally and touch an audience, okay? This film and Toy Story 1. Well, actually, for that matter, all the Toy Story films are capable of doing it because they had a lot more heart. They're all CGI, but you actually bought into the characters. The CGI became a paintbrush instead of one of the stars of the film. This is one where you actually can forego knowing it's CGI and you actually pay attention to the characters because you're invested in them. which is the proper use of CGI. So, uh, seemed like there was another point I was going to make. Made one more point.
Oh, there's so many points to make
But
about
yeah,
this movie.
like I said, there's so much to unpack. But all in all, this is a good film. One thing we had talked about before we started filming here, was James Gunn and he's going to DC now. He's in charge of the DC universe now. So he's going to be doing basically in charge of the films and the TV series, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And he's writing and directing Superman Legacy. I think that's what it is.
Okay. I tell you what, I feel better about James Gunn doing Superman Legacy after seeing this film.
Yes.
Than I did before. And that's with the first two films. Now, the reason I say that, they're Marvel and DC. Okay, they're two different animals completely. Two entirely different animals. Like cats and dogs, basically. Marvel has a worldview, DC has a worldview. Okay? And the reason James Gunn and the Guardians of the Galaxy franchise has done so well over for Marvel is for a very simple reason. James Gunn introduced a worldview that was counter to that prevailing through most of Marvel. Yes. And it's the worldview that goes through the Marvels that will be coming up. It ran through Black Panther. It ran through all of Phase 4. Ant-Man and the Wasp 3 was Marvel's worldview cranked up to the nth degree, to almost to the point of nihilism. Okay? Look that one up. Nihilism. Nihilism. James Gunn is an optimist. The Marvel worldview is pessimist. Okay? Now, in Marvel, it's always raining. Whenever you have a city, it's gritty. I'm a poet, didn't know it. Nobody respects the heroes. In fact, everybody suspects the heroes. There's the heroes, whenever there's a meeting of heroes, they're more likely to fight than not. So it's a very negative view of a world. It's a negative worldview. It's pessimist. In DC is the opposite. Now, take Batman out, take the Snyderverse out, take all the recent gritty, rebooty crap out. Go back to DC at its core when it was, really successful. DC Comics. The sun shines in DC. Not always. Sometimes it's night. But the sun shines. Unless it's Batman, it's typically not raining. Unless we're getting close to a climax and we need a dramatic setting. But the sun is shining. The streets are clean. The people are basically good. And the people actually support their heroes. They're proud of their heroes. They enjoy their heroes. So this is... The DC Universe itself is a supporting cast that supports its heroes. Over at Marvel, the Marvel Universe is a supporting cast that holds back its heroes. Okay? The closest the DC ever got to the X-Men was the Doom Patrol. Because the Doom Patrol were outsiders, they were derided and not really respected. People weren't sure about them. But in the end, the Doom Patrol redeemed themselves. As a point of fact, the Doom Patrol existed before the X-Men, and the X-Men was Marvel's answer to the Doom Patrol. So, it's just Marvel got a lot more mileage out of it because they have a nihilistic worldview. So, all the woke wankery we deal with today, the X-Men have been making bank off that since roughly 1975. Okay? All the I'm such a victim all the time. Oh dear, the whole world's out to get me. That's X-Men since All New, All Different, Giant Size X-Men #1. Okay. James Gunn going over to DC. I had to stop and think where it was. James Gunn going over to DC. He has that optimistic worldview, which is what DC desperately needs. Listen, your audience for these movies is fatiguing of the same tired struggle over, and over, and over. This is why the first Shazam did well and the second one didn't. I would say, because the first one actually kind of had a sense of humor, didn't take itself seriously. Yes, things got real towards in parts of the movie, but it had an upbeat, optimistic worldview. They went a little too hard with Billy Batson being an orphan and not liking being a part of a family that fostered him in. A foster family is what I'm trying to say. But that's to be expected from today's angsty directors. This was as optimistic as most directors can get. James Gunn, on the other hand, is bringing this worldview, this optimistic worldview, that heroes should not only be accepted, but they should be celebrated. And he's bringing that into the DC universe. That is a very, very good thing, in my opinion. After seeing what he was able to do with 3 here, yes, it was 30 minutes too long. Yes, it was dark. Yes, it was grim. Yes, there are parts where you're just shaking your head like, get on with it already. Yes, the movie is 30 minutes too long, but the 2 hours left over. I just said this about Nefarious, as a matter of fact. It was the best 80 minutes of a 110 minute movie I ever saw. This is the best 2 hours of a 2.5 hour movie I've ever seen. You could cut half an hour from this, and you can't. I could do it. You cut a half hour from it, you wouldn't miss it, and you'd get a much tighter, better movie and more emotionally impactful because now you're not struggling with fatigue toward the end of the movie. The When you get into the final 15-minute climax of this film, it is going to punch you in the gut, especially if you cry watching the ASPCA commercials on TV. Okay, you're gonna cry, but it's a good movie. It's worth the effort. Yeah, I know you don't want to reward Disney for the crap that they do. Don't support the crap that they do. Don't watch Peter Pan and Wendy. From what we understand, 4 million fewer people are watching Peter Pan and Wendy than would have watched it a month ago or a quarter ago. So, yeah, that's how far Disney Plus is down. So don't hold Disney and Marvel, for that matter, against Guardians of the Galaxy 3. The film is worth a watch. If you enjoyed either of the first 2 films, or even if you enjoyed old school Marvel, like from Iron Man movie 1 up to, I'm going to say Civil War, because I'm honestly tired of hearing about Endgame. But if you wanted to see, if you enjoyed Marvel in its heyday, Marvel Studios in its heyday, you're going to like this film. So on the scale of 5, we have a 1 to 5 scale here at Geekin Out, with 1 being watch it for free on Pluto, 5 being worth full price with a date on a Saturday night, and 0 just being not even drunk. Chris, where would you put this? He gives it a 5. He's trying to give it a 10, but he's even worse at math than I am.
Listen. This movie is very worth it. I choked up a couple of times. I love space adventures where you have like this ragtag team, and it seems like that those are way better than most. I mean, I can sit here and think of like uh, Firefly, um, Cowboy Bebop, things like that, to where you have like these space adventures of people who are just from all walks of life, all broken, all have something wrong with them, and they're just going on. It's a whole lot better to watch those type of science fiction space movies than Star Wars, where it's always about this, and even Star Trek, which has like the most intellect part when it comes to space. But this is just a group of nobodies like you and me going on these random adventures. Sometimes they don't even ask to do these things. It just falls in their lap and they just deal with it. I love those type of storytelling movies, and this is right up there. I think that's why I love the Guardians of the Galaxy so much, is because these people just, if you watch the first one, it's like there's no reason why these people should be put in a room together, and they're just thrown together. And then somehow at the end of all this, they end up becoming this one gigantic family of friends. and they're willing to do anything for each other. And I just love how it just went from strangers to being way more than just strangers. So yes, this movie rocks.
Again, there's that optimistic view. That's something Star Trek had at the beginning and lost. Once Gene Roddenberry passed, that was the end of the optimism. Everybody since then has had this idea that pessimism is what sells tickets, and it doesn't, because most people lead enough drudgery in their lives to not want to have to pay $10 plus the cost of popcorn and a soda and the babysitter for the kids in order to see it at a theater. So, so you give it a 5. I would give it a 4. I would say it'd be worth a matinee, at least to try it out and see if it appeals to you. You mentioned a bunch of other shows, Firefly, The Orville.
The Orville, yeah.
Those never really appealed to me that much. I gotta admit, I'm not an Orville fan. I wasn't a Firefly fan, but it doesn't mean that I can't enjoy the film. It's just not the ragtag band of misadventurers is something that it's just not my cup of tea. But I don't begrudge anybody for it. There's nothing wrong with it. Chris enjoys it. He would give it a 5. I don't. I would give it a 4. In fact, I give it a 4, even though I don't like the ragtag bunch of losers getting together and accomplishing great things. It's just not my cup of tea, but I give it a 4 anyway. That's my show of respect for it. So even it out, give it a 4.5. So, one of the better films of the year. Certainly one of the best films Marvel has released in a mighty long time. Since Endgame. Well, you want to count since No Way Home.
Right? Oh yeah, that's true. It's not. Yeah.
Which, incidentally, we've got the new Spider-Verse movie coming out sometime in June.
Yeah, there's a lot of movies coming out in June.
Yeah, so which I'm kind of surprised the new Spider-Verse movie isn't coming out for Memorial Day, but I'm sure there's something else coming out in the middle.
I think Indiana Jones comes out in June. There's like 2 others that are like really big.
Indiana Jones 5 has been snake bit from the beginning. Since Kathleen Kennedy took off with it. I have heard a lot of reports that we're getting off the topic here, but hearing a lot of reports that there's been a lot of reshoots and Harrison Ford's had to come back in and do a bunch of stuff. Apparently, the scuttlebutt had it that Indy was supposed to die in the film, and then his girl sidekick that he always has was supposed to use the Dial of Destiny, go back in time, and basically be Indiana Jones and erase Harrison Ford from the picture. Supposedly that is out. They're not doing that anymore, which is a good thing. Hopefully we don't have any mute refrigerators in this one. We'll see what happens. Also, we have 3 new Doctor Who specials coming out this year that actually have David Tennant in it. They've finally given up on Rainbow Chick. I always called her Rainbow Bright because I could never remember her name. She always had the rainbow suspenders. But we have 3 new Doctor Who specials coming out. Hopefully they'll be good. I don't hold out a lot of hope. But maybe, just maybe, BBC will pull their heads out of their rumps long enough to let us have some good ones. So, that's basically the news. And this is basically the video we're going to put out this week because we got things to do. Any final thoughts, Chris, on Guardians 3 or anything else we talked about?
Go see it. Go see it. Go see it.
One more for you.
Go see it.
There's 5. I'll say, see it if you gotta, see it if you gotta, see it if you gotta, see it if you gotta. That's 4. Go see it. So until next time, Spike, Chris, y'all keep geeking out.
Bye.